A young nurse saved the life of a pregnant woman at the park when she passed out. 5 hours later, she received a shocking message that will change her life forever. It was a quiet afternoon at the city park when Elena, a young nurse enjoying her day off, noticed a woman swaying unsteadily by the fountain. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting long shadows on the pavement. Birds chirped in the distance, and a soft breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers through the air. Elena had come to the park to escape the fast-paced life of hospital shifts, seeking solace in the peaceful surroundings. She had a moment to herself, a rare occurrence in the life of a nurse whose days were often filled with the hum of hospital machines and the constant need to care for others. She walked slowly by the fountain, her steps calm, her face relaxed in the quiet of the day. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the warmth of the sun soak into her skin. It was then that she heard it, a soft, unsteady rustle of movement followed by a quiet gasp. Elena's head snapped toward the sound. Her eyes locked onto a woman standing a few feet away, her body swaying like a tree in a gentle wind. The woman's face was pale, her hand clutching her stomach as if trying to steady herself. She took another faltering step, then collapsed to the ground with a soft thud. A chill of urgency rushed through Elena's veins. Her heart skipped a beat, but her training kicked in, taking over the panic that was beginning to rise. Without a second thought, she sprinted toward the woman. The soft grass beneath her feet felt like nothing in that moment. All that mattered was the woman who lay helpless on the ground, her body unmoving. When Elena reached her side, she knelt beside the woman, her eyes scanning the scene with clinical precision. The woman was unconscious, her breath shallow but steady. Elena's fingers gently checked her pulse, feeling the faint, rhythmic beats beneath the skin. It was there, but weak. Elena's mind raced. The woman was pregnant. Elena could tell by the rounded belly and the faint flutter of movement beneath the surface of the skin. This was serious. Elena's hands moved quickly, but with practiced care. She tilted the woman's head back slightly to open her airway, placing a hand on her abdomen to check for any obvious signs of trauma. Her gaze flickered to the woman's face, now pale and damp with sweat, her eyes closed in unconsciousness. "Stay with me," Elena murmured softly, her voice calm and steady. She reached for her phone, dialing emergency services as she spoke. "This is Elena Pierce, a nurse at Mercy General. I have an unconscious pregnant woman here at the city park, near the fountain. Her vitals are weak. Please send an ambulance immediately." Her voice was clear, efficient. Everything she had learned during her years of training now coming to the forefront. As the dispatcher assured her that help was on the way, Elena stayed by the woman's side, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced around the park, her mind racing with the weight of the situation. People had begun to gather at a distance, watching from the sidelines as the scene unfolded. But Elena wasn't concerned with the spectators. Her focus remained on the woman who lay before her. She needed to stay calm. She needed to keep her breathing steady and her hands firm. The woman's life, and the life of her unborn child, were in her hands now. She couldn't afford to panic. Elena shifted to her knees, staying close to the woman, never leaving her side. She continued to check for signs of life, watching for any changes in her pulse or breathing. The seconds felt like minutes, stretching long in the silence between them. Elena's fingers remained on the woman's wrist, feeling each delicate pulse as it moved under her skin. Her gaze stayed on the woman's stomach, her heart tightening with the responsibility of ensuring both lives were cared for. It wasn't just the woman's life at risk, it was her child's too. Within moments, the sound of sirens filled the air. Elena's breath of relief was quiet, but filled with gratitude. The paramedics arrived in a blur of motion, taking control of the situation with practiced efficiency. Elena stepped back as they worked, her mind still focused on the woman. The paramedics assessed her condition, hooking her up to an oxygen mask and preparing her for transport. Elena could see the woman's chest rise and fall more steadily now, the shallow breath turning into something more consistent. She'd done her part. She had stabilized her for the moment. One of the paramedics, a tall man with a steady gaze, looked up at Elena as they prepared to lift the woman onto the stretcher. "Thanks for your help," he said, his voice low but sincere. "We'll take it from here." Elena nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Just doing my job," she said, though the modesty of the statement couldn't quite cover the relief in her eyes. The woman was going to make it. Her heart, still beating weakly but steadily, seemed like a promise of life. Elena had done her part. Now it was up to the doctors to take over. Before the paramedics closed the doors of the ambulance, the EMT who had spoken to her earlier approached her again. He held out a small notepad, his pen ready. "Hey, just in case we need to follow up with you, or if the hospital needs any details," he said, his tone friendly but professional. "Could I have your name and number?" Elena, still trying to steady her breath, gave him a small, distracted nod. She recited her full name and gave him her contact number. It felt like a trivial detail after everything that had just happened, but she understood the importance of it. If the hospital needed any clarification or if they needed to reach her, it was better to be prepared. "Thank you," she said quietly as the paramedic jotted down her information. His eyes met hers for a moment, his expression unreadable, but something in the way he looked at her made her feel like the weight of her actions had been noticed. As the ambulance doors shut, the noise of the city park rushed back into her ears. The peaceful stillness she had felt earlier was now overshadowed by a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Elena watched the ambulance speed away, its flashing lights cutting through the late afternoon sun. Her body was still vibrating with the adrenaline that had surged through her during the rescue. She let out a long breath, standing still for a moment, her eyes following the vehicle until it disappeared down the road. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and a familiar feeling of quiet anxiety began to creep in. What had just happened? Had she done enough? Was the woman going to be okay? Elena's eyes drifted down to the ground where the woman had collapsed, her mind replaying every moment of the encounter. The whole thing had happened so fast. She had acted without thinking, following her instincts. But now that the immediate crisis was over, doubt crept in. Elena knew that the work she did, day in and day out, was often thankless. Nurses were often the unseen heroes, the ones who worked behind the scenes to save lives. But this moment had been different. In those few minutes, she had made a life-changing impact on someone, on two someones. It wasn't just a part of her job. It was a reminder of why she had chosen this path in the first place, to help, to heal, to make a difference. Elena stood there for a moment longer, the world around her bustling with the usual noise of a city park. But to her, it felt as if everything had slowed down. She was no longer just a young nurse on a break. She was someone who had just saved a life. And though she didn't know it yet, that single act of compassion would set her on a path that would forever change the course of her life. Later that day at her home, Elena sank into the familiar comfort of her couch, finally allowing herself a few moments of reprieve. The chaos of the afternoon still lingered in her mind, but for now, the quiet of her small apartment seemed to wrap around her like a blanket. She had done what she was trained to do, helped a woman in need, calmed a tense situation, and ensured that help arrived when it was most critical. But now, as the day wound down, there was a strange stillness that followed her every step. The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the skyline, casting a soft, golden hue across the room. It reflected off the polished wood of the coffee table and illuminated the small details of her living space. The room, though modest, felt warm, inviting. Elena sat in the corner of her worn sofa, holding a mug of tea between her hands. The steam curled into the air, bringing with it the comforting scent of chamomile, her favorite after a long day. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the tea seep into her, trying to unwind and shake off the adrenaline of the afternoon. Her thoughts drifted back to the pregnant woman, her pale face, the way her body had crumpled in that moment of crisis, the weight of her life and the child she carried resting in Elena's hands. The woman's condition had stabilized, but how was she now? What had happened once the paramedics took over? She had done everything she could, but the uncertainty still gnawed at her. The sudden buzz of her phone on the coffee table broke her train of thought. She had left it on silent, mostly out of habit after the hectic rush of hospital calls and patient requests. But now, hearing the vibration, Elena reached for it absent-mindedly. Her fingers brushed the cool glass of the screen as she picked it up, her mind still half occupied by the woman in the park. When she saw the notification, her pulse skipped. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. The message was brief but direct. "You saved my wife and unborn child today. I want to meet you. You have no idea what you've done for my family." Her heart thudded in her chest, the words landing like a heavy weight. She blinked, unsure if she had read it correctly. The message was clear, but the reality of it didn't quite sink in. Who could this be? She'd only provided basic care and called for help. There was no reason for anyone to thank her, especially not with such an emotional tone. The fact that someone had sent this message was shocking enough, but the intensity of it made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a precipice. Elena quickly reread the message, her eyes scanning the words again, but the confusion only deepened. She hadn't expected to hear from anyone, much less someone claiming that she had saved their loved ones. She had acted without thinking earlier in the park. Her only goal was to ensure that the woman received proper care. But the implications of this message were beyond anything she had anticipated. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the phone. She had no idea how this person had gotten her number. The paramedic had taken it earlier, but it wasn't as though she had volunteered it to anyone else. Could they have tracked her down through the hospital? Or was this just some bizarre coincidence? Her thoughts began to race as she considered the possibilities. Was it possible that the woman she helped was someone important? Someone who had the means to reach out personally? Elena bit her lip, thinking about the woman's husband. Could he have sent this? But what could he possibly want from her? Was it just gratitude, or was there more to it than that? And why was he asking to meet her? She set the phone down, staring at it for a moment as a wave of anxiety hit her. Her mind raced with questions, but none of the answers made sense. The message felt too surreal, too sudden. What if this was a mistake? What if this was someone playing a prank, or worse, trying to get something from her? After all, not every person who reached out with gratitude had good intentions. Elena had dealt with difficult patients and complicated situations before, and this could very well be one of those cases. But then again, something about the message felt different. There was a rawness to it, an honesty that Elena couldn't ignore. It didn't feel like a scam or a joke. It felt like someone who had been deeply impacted by her actions and was now reaching out to express their thanks in a way that only someone truly grateful could. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. It was just one message. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe it was an opportunity to finally be recognized for something she had done that mattered. After all, her job as a nurse was often thankless, and it was rare for her to receive any acknowledgement for the work she did. Perhaps this was a way for someone to do that, to show her that her efforts had made a difference. With a shaky breath, Elena tapped a response. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as she thought of what to say. She couldn't ignore the feeling of uncertainty that still lingered, but her curiosity won out. She typed carefully. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad I could help. I'm not sure what you have in mind, but I'd be happy to meet." As soon as she hit send, a rush of nerves flooded her. She set the phone back down on the coffee table, running a hand through her hair, trying to quell the nervous energy that had taken over. What was she doing? Was this a good idea? She stared at the phone, waiting for a response, but nothing came right away. Minutes passed, but the silence hung in the air, only broken by the occasional rustle of wind outside. Elena tried to focus on the warmth of her tea, the way the gentle steam rose and disappeared, but the words of that message kept echoing in her mind. What had she really done for this man and his family? She had just acted on instinct, doing her job. Was this all just a result of an overblown sense of gratitude, or was there something more? The phone buzzed again, and Elena's heart skipped a beat. She snatched it up quickly, her hands slightly trembling. A new message appeared. "Thank you, Elena. I'll have my assistant reach out to you to set up a time. My wife and I would love to meet you in person. Please know that you've done more than you realize." Elena read it once, then twice, the words sinking in deeper each time. She set the phone down again, but this time it was different. There was no immediate rush of anxiety or uncertainty. Instead, a strange mix of excitement and wariness swirled in her stomach. This wasn't just a simple thank you. It was an invitation to something much more significant, something that Elena couldn't quite put her finger on. She leaned back on the couch, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as she tried to make sense of it all. How had her life, one that had always felt so routine and small, suddenly become part of something so big? She was just a nurse, a young woman trying to make a living, helping others in quiet, unnoticed ways. But now, someone was offering her an opportunity, an invitation into a world she had never even dreamed of. As the evening wore on, Elena found herself unable to shake the growing feeling that this moment was the beginning of something that would change her life forever. She had no idea what to expect, but something inside her told her that the road ahead would be anything but ordinary. The next day, Elena found herself standing at the edge of a world she had never imagined entering. She had woken up this morning just like any other day, though a fluttering anxiety gnawed at her stomach, anxiety that only grew with each passing moment. The previous night's message from an unfamiliar number had haunted her dreams, and now the day had come. She stood before an enormous, ornate gate that seemed to stretch for miles, its black ironwork intricately woven into patterns she could never have fathomed. The imposing structure loomed before her, casting long shadows on the neatly manicured lawn beyond. Elena had never seen anything like this before. The mansion behind the gates was more than just grand. It was a monument to wealth, with its towering columns, wide windows, and stonework that gleamed under the golden morning sun. It was a place reserved for the elite, a world where people like her, nurses, working class, never ventured. Her breath caught as she took in the sheer size of the estate, her sneakers making a quiet rustling sound on the pristine gravel driveway as she approached the gates. The chauffeur-driven cars parked neatly on the side, the well-maintained gardens, the opulence, it all made her feel incredibly small. She adjusted the hem of her simple dress, wishing she had dressed differently, but there was no turning back now. The man on the other end of the message, Jonathan Crane, was waiting for her inside. The gates opened slowly with a soft hum, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped forward. His attire was immaculate, a sharp suit, perfectly fitted, and shoes that gleamed in the sunlight. He had the sort of poise that made him seem like he had never in his life been anything but wealthy. But when he smiled, it was warm and inviting, completely disarming the tension in the air. "Miss Elena Pierce," he said with a firm, confident handshake, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I'm Jonathan Crane. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Elena hesitated, her heart racing, her palms slightly damp against his handshake. It's an honor to meet you, sir," she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. She could feel the weight of his gaze, but unlike the cool, calculating stares she had sometimes received in her line of work, there was kindness in it. Genuine kindness. Jonathan seemed to notice the discomfort she felt, and his smile softened. "Please, don't be nervous. Come inside. You're not here to be intimidated, I assure you." He motioned toward the mansion, and Elena felt an overwhelming sense of awe as she followed him up the marble steps. The grandeur of it all was beyond her comprehension. She had read about billionaires, seen their mansions on television, but to actually stand here, on the threshold of such wealth, felt like stepping into an entirely different universe. The smell of fresh flowers wafted toward her as they entered, and the warmth of the house wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. The air was rich with an elegant perfume, the scent of polished wood and fine furnishings. Inside, the mansion was even more magnificent than the exterior. High ceilings stretched above them, adorned with intricate chandeliers. The walls were lined with oil paintings of places and people Elena could only dream of visiting. The floors gleamed with the sheen of expensive marble, and everything around her was pristine. Everything in its place, everything expensive. Jonathan, with his calm, almost effortless presence, led her further into the grand hall. He motioned for her to take a seat in one of the plush chairs. "I know this is all a bit overwhelming, Elena. Please, make yourself comfortable," he said, his voice lowering slightly as he invited her to sit across from him in a beautifully appointed sitting room. A fire burned softly in the fireplace, adding warmth to the already opulent space. Elena sat stiffly, trying to relax, but the contrast between her modest life and the extravagance of Jonathan's world was stark. She felt almost out of place, like she didn't belong here. Her hands rested in her lap, her fingers subtly trembling, but Jonathan didn't seem to notice. He offered her a cup of tea, and though she wasn't sure if she should, she accepted, feeling a bit like a fish out of water. She couldn't help but glance around at the fine china, the silver teapot, and the way Jonathan moved with the ease of someone who had lived among such luxury his entire life. "You're wondering why you're here," Jonathan said after a moment, settling into his own chair. His voice was warm, grounded, as though he were speaking to a friend rather than someone he barely knew. "I can only imagine how strange this must all feel." Elena nodded, her nerves still evident. She sipped the tea, delicate and floral, a stark contrast to the strong coffee she usually drank. "Yes," she replied, I'm not sure what this is all about. You mentioned in your message that I saved your wife and unborn child, but I don't understand why I'm here. I'm just a nurse." It wasn't anything extraordinary. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes serious now. "No, Elena. What you did that day was extraordinary. You don't understand the gravity of it, but I do. My wife, Sophie, was in a very delicate state. Her pregnancy was high risk. When she collapsed, I thought I was going to lose both of them. You acted quickly, decisively. You didn't hesitate, and because of that, you gave them both the chance to live. Elena's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't known. The moment in the park had been so chaotic, and she had been focused on the basics, getting the woman safe, calling for help. She hadn't realized how critical it truly was. Jonathan continued, his voice full of emotion. You've done more than just provide medical assistance, Elena. You've saved my family. And that means everything to me. Elena sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in slowly. She had been trained to help people, but she had never been told, never been shown, how much her actions could affect someone's life. Here, sitting in this grand room, in front of this man who could have anything and everything, she suddenly realized that the small things, the decisions, the choices she made on a daily basis, held much greater significance than she had ever known. Jonathan seemed to sense her quiet awe and gave her a reassuring smile. You are exactly who you claim to be, Elena, he said gently. And I want to make sure you know how much we appreciate what you've done. But this is more than just a thank you. Elena, still processing the gravity of the situation, nodded slowly. I don't know what to say, Mr. Crane. Then don't say anything, he said, his voice soft but firm. Just accept the gratitude. And understand that this is not a formality. You didn't do this because you expected something in return. I know that. I just want to make sure you know how much you've changed our lives. The room was quiet for a moment as Elena let his words wash over her. She felt an odd sense of warmth in her chest, despite the overwhelming strangeness of the situation. For the first time, she felt like she truly mattered. Then, Jonathan stood in motion for her to follow. He led her down a hall lined with photographs of his family, of his wife Sophie, and their child. He stopped in front of a large, framed portrait of his wife, a woman with kind eyes and a peaceful smile. He paused there for a long moment before turning back to Elena. There's one more thing I want to offer you, he said, his voice tinged with sincerity. A token of our gratitude. A way to show you that your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed. Elena's pulse quickened. What was he saying? A token? She had done what any nurse would do. She didn't need anything in return. But Jonathan's gaze was steady, and his words left no room for argument. I want to offer you something that will change your life, Elena, he said. Something that will give you the future you deserve. The conversation between Elena and Jonathan flowed seamlessly, his calm voice steadying her nerves, but the surreal nature of the situation was still making her pulse race. The warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions spinning in her head. She hadn't expected anything like this. A simple thank you from a grateful stranger, perhaps, but nothing like this. As Elena continued to digest his words, Jonathan suddenly stood up. The motion was fluid, almost effortless, and he walked over to a desk in the corner of the room, the soft sound of his shoes tapping lightly on the marble floor. He rummaged for a moment, his back turned to her, before he returned, holding something in his hand. Elena's brow furrowed in curiosity as she watched him approach, his calm demeanor never faltering. As he drew nearer, her gaze locked onto the envelope he was holding. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way he was presenting it, so matter-of-fact, that made her wonder what was coming next. Jonathan extended the envelope toward her, his gaze steady and unwavering. This is for you, he said simply, his voice warm and sincere. Elena's hand hesitated before she reached out to accept it. The envelope felt unexpectedly heavy, as if it contained more than just paper. She looked up at Jonathan, searching his face for any sign of what this was about. He didn't look like he was playing a game. There was no hint of a smirk, no twinkle of mischief in his eyes. This was genuine. With a slow exhale, Elena tore open the envelope. Inside, nestled between layers of thick, crisp paper, was a check. Her eyes widened as she saw the amount printed on it, $2 million. The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Elena blinked, trying to make sense of the numbers on the check. $2 million. She stared at the check, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. It was more money than she had ever imagined, more than she could possibly hope to earn in a lifetime. Her hands trembled as she held the check in front of her, her breath coming in shallow gasps. It felt like the world around her had momentarily stopped. $2 million. How could this be? Why would Jonathan Crane, a man of such wealth, with everything at his fingertips, give her this kind of money? The air in the room grew thick with tension as Elena's mind raced. She wasn't sure what to say. Her mouth went dry. She thought about all the people who might have the nerve to take such an amount with ease, but not her. Not someone like her. She had never needed anything like this, never expected anything like this. Her voice barely found its way out of her throat. "Sir, why this money?" Her question came out softly, but it was filled with sincerity and confusion. She wasn't just asking about the money itself, she was asking about the reasoning behind it, the weight of the gesture. Jonathan's gaze softened, though there was still a firmness to it that conveyed his sincerity. "You've changed my family's life, Elena," he replied, his voice steady. "You saved not just my wife, but also our unborn child. What you did that day was nothing short of extraordinary. We will never forget it. This is just a small way for us to show our gratitude." Elena felt the weight of his words, but it didn't make the situation any easier to understand. $2 million. She had simply acted on instinct, as any nurse would. She hadn't thought twice about helping the woman in the park. She had done what was needed in the moment, nothing more. Yet, here she was, holding a check for an amount that could change the course of her entire life. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Should she refuse the money? Was this a bribe of some sort? No, it didn't feel that way. There was nothing in Jonathan's demeanor to suggest that he was trying to manipulate her. But even so, she felt a deep discomfort as she looked at the check again. For a moment, Elena almost blurted out that she couldn't accept it. But then she saw Jonathan's face, calm and sincere, and something inside her shifted. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no entitlement, just a genuine sense of gratitude. He wasn't offering this money out of obligation or a sense of superiority. He was offering it because he truly believed that she deserved it. Her fingers curled around the check, the weight of it heavy in her palm. The house around her, the grandness of it all, suddenly felt like a world she wasn't sure she belonged to. But Jonathan's presence was grounding, steadying her as she tried to make sense of this overwhelming gesture. I don't know what to say," Elena whispered, still processing. "This is too much. I did what anyone would have done in that situation." Jonathan smiled, but it wasn't a smile of dismissal, it was a smile that acknowledged the humbling truth. "No, Elena. Not just anyone would have acted the way you did. What you did wasn't ordinary, and neither is this. We are simply trying to show you the gratitude we feel for what you did for our family. This isn't charity. It's appreciation." Elena felt the sincerity of his words, but still, she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she could accept such an extravagant gift. She had worked hard all her life, earning what she had with her own two hands, and yet here she was, being offered something that seemed too large, too out of reach for someone like her. What would she do with $2 million? What kind of life could she even build with that kind of money? Jonathan seemed to sense her internal conflict and leaned forward slightly. "I understand your hesitation," he said, his voice lowering, as though offering her a chance to consider things on her terms. "But know this isn't about changing who you are. This isn't about making you someone you're not. This is simply about giving you the resources to live a life that reflects the incredible person you already are." The simplicity of his words hit Elena harder than she expected. It wasn't about buying her, changing her, or forcing her into a different mold. It was simply an expression of the profound impact she had made on his family's life. She looked at the check once more, and this time, the weight of it didn't feel as suffocating. It felt like a gift, a token of something much greater than money. After a long pause, Elena looked up at Jonathan, her gaze steady but still filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what to say, but thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for believing in me." Jonathan smiled, his eyes warm but serious. "You don't need to say anything more, Elena. Just take it as a gift from a grateful family. You've changed our lives, and we'll always remember that." Elena nodded, still in a state of disbelief, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of possibility open up before her. She didn't know what she would do with this unexpected gift, but she knew that something inside her had shifted. It wasn't just the money, it was the recognition. It was the validation of her worth, not as a nurse, but as a person. As she left the mansion later that afternoon, the world outside felt different. The check still sat heavy in her purse, but now, it wasn't just an amount of money. It was a symbol of change. Elena didn't yet know how it would change her, but she knew her life would never be the same. Elena sat in the quiet of her apartment, her body slumped against the couch, the $2 million check still clutched in her hands. She stared at the numbers printed on the paper, but the figures seemed to blur and shift as her thoughts spiraled. The weight of the check felt like a physical presence in her hands, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She had never imagined this kind of situation. The world outside her apartment seemed to buzz with the normality of life, cars passing by, people going about their daily routines, but in this moment, inside her apartment, everything felt suspended, as if time itself had paused to let her process the impossible. $2 million. It was incomprehensible. It wasn't just the amount that overwhelmed her, it was the implications of accepting it. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The logical side of her mind told her that this was a gift, an expression of gratitude, but the other part of her, her moral compass, felt a nagging sense of discomfort. Was it right to accept such an extravagant amount for what she had done? She had simply done her job, saved a woman's life, and helped ensure the well-being of an unborn child. In her mind, there was nothing extraordinary about it. It had been a matter of instinct, a matter of duty, but the check was a reminder that others saw it as something more. She stood up abruptly, her feet moving restlessly across the floor. She paced back and forth, the small apartment feeling even more confining as she struggled with her thoughts. Could she really accept this kind of money? Would it change her? What would it say about her? Elena stopped at the window, peering out into the city streets below. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the buildings, but it did little to calm the storm inside her. Her mind drifted to her student loans, the pile of debt that seemed to grow with every passing month, and her cramped apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the worn-out furniture. She had worked so hard to get where she was, but she still felt trapped. Was this money a solution? Could it be the fresh start she had been longing for? Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. It was Sarah, her best friend, calling. Elena picked up the phone, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She needed someone to talk to, someone who knew her well enough to offer advice without judgment. "Hey, Sarah," Elena said, her voice strained with the weight of everything she was carrying. "Hey girl, how's everything going?" Sarah's voice was warm, but Elena could hear the concern beneath it. I'm not sure," Elena replied, taking a deep breath. "I need to talk to you about something. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. Elena hesitated, then launched into the story of the day. The woman at the park, the collapse, the ambulance, the unexpected meeting with Jonathan Crane. As she recounted everything, the events felt surreal even as she spoke them aloud. Sarah listened intently, only interrupting to ask questions or offer exclamations of disbelief. But when Elena finally reached the part about the check, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. $2 million, Sarah asked in awe. "Are you serious?" Elena laughed nervously, her fingers tightening around the phone. "Yeah, I don't know what to think. I mean, I didn't do it for the money. I was just trying to help." "I get it," Sarah said, her voice softer now. "But this is huge, Elena. You didn't ask for it, but it's being offered. That's a big deal." "I don't know," Elena said, shaking her head even though Sarah couldn't see her. "I keep thinking about my loans, about how hard things have been. And now there's this opportunity to change everything. But it feels wrong, like it's too much. Like I'm not the kind of person who should have this kind of money. Are you kidding me? Who else deserves it more than you?" Sarah replied, her voice firm. "You saved someone's life, Elena. You helped a family. You didn't do it for the money, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't accept it. It's not a bribe. It's not a handout. It's a thank you for something extraordinary." "I know," Elena murmured, but the uncertainty still lingered. "But will it change me? Will I become someone I don't recognize? I've always been independent, always tried to do things on my own. This feels like, I don't know, like a shift in everything I've known." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sarah was thinking, weighing her words carefully before she spoke. "I get it," Sarah said slowly. "I do. But think about this. Money isn't bad. It's what you do with it that matters. If this helps you, if it helps you live a life that makes you happy, that gives you freedom, then why not take it? You're still you, Elena. This doesn't change who you are. It's just a tool to help you build a better life. That's all." Elena stared at the check again, her mind still turning. Sarah's words echoed in her head. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe she was overthinking it. After all, she had worked so hard to get by, to make ends meet. This money could help ease her financial burden, could help her finally breathe without worrying about the constant weight of debt. But it also felt like a test of some kind, a test of her character. Could she stay true to herself while accepting such generosity? Her thoughts swirled as she walked over to the window again, the city skyline now bathed in the soft glow of the evening. The decision loomed before her, larger than anything she had faced in a long time. Should she accept the gift and allow it to change the course of her life, or should she turn it down, clinging to the idea that she didn't need anything beyond her own determination? She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She thought about everything she had struggled with: the long nights of studying to become a nurse, the sacrifices, the isolation. She thought about the woman in the park, the fear she had seen in her eyes, and how in that moment, Elena had done what she was trained to do. Maybe it was time to stop questioning whether she deserved something better and start believing that she did. "I need to think about it," Elena said finally, her voice steady. "I get it," Sarah said. "Take your time. But whatever you decide, just remember this. You're not alone in this. You have people who care about you." Elena smiled softly, feeling the warmth of Sarah's words. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from what life was offering her. The check still sat heavy in her hands, but now it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a chance to finally step into a future that was hers to create. Elena stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the quiet hum of the apartment around her barely registering. She gazed at her reflection, searching for something: confidence, clarity, the assurance that the decision she was about to make was the right one. The $2 million check lay on the table behind her, a silent reminder of everything that had brought her to this moment. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was an opportunity, a chance to change her life in ways she had never imagined. As she studied herself, she wasn't sure when exactly she had crossed over from doubt to acceptance. The turmoil, the long nights of questioning, and the endless back and forth in her mind had finally given way to something else: a quiet resolve. She had spent days agonizing over the implications of accepting the gift, wondering if it would change her, if it would make her less of who she was. But now, in the stillness of this moment, Elena understood that it was not about what the money would turn her into. It was about what she could do with it, how she could use this unexpected gift to make a difference. She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed her family. The conversation that followed was full of surprise and disbelief. Her parents were stunned at first, unsure how to process the news that their daughter had received such a massive sum from a stranger. They had always raised Elena to be independent, to rely on her own strength and determination. So hearing about the $2 million was as much a shock to them as it was to her. "Are you sure, Elena?" Her mother's voice cracked with a mixture of concern and awe. "This is a lot. Are you certain you want to accept it?" Elena could feel the weight of her mother's worry, but she also sensed a flicker of pride in her words. They had always taught her to question, to think critically, and now, as she made her decision, she could hear their lessons ringing in her ears. "Yes, I've thought about it long enough," Elena replied, her voice steady. "I'm going to accept it, but I won't let it change who I am. This money, it's not just for me. It's for a purpose." She went on to explain how she planned to pay off her student loans, something that had loomed over her since graduation, an ever-present reminder of the sacrifices she had made. The relief of that burden alone was enough to make her heart swell with hope. But she had other ideas as well. She wanted to do more. She envisioned setting aside part of the money for her future, securing her independence in ways she had only dreamed of. And then there was the charity she wanted to start, one that would support underserved communities, particularly those who had limited access to health care. It was a way to pay forward the kindness that had been shown to her, a way to make sure that no one else felt as though they didn't have the resources to change their lives, just as she had. Her father's voice, thick with emotion, came through the phone. "I'm proud of you, Elena. You've always wanted to help people. Now you'll be able to do it on your own terms." His words settled over her like a warm blanket. Elena felt her shoulders relax, the last vestiges of her hesitation dissolving. She wasn't just taking the money, she was making it a tool for change. A tool that could impact lives, including her own. She placed the phone back on its charger, taking a deep breath. The decision was made. She had made peace with it. The uncertainty had been replaced with purpose. And now, as she turned back to the mirror, she saw a different version of herself staring back. A woman who had been tested, who had questioned, but who had found her way through it all. Elena stood tall, her reflection bold and determined. The possibilities ahead were endless. She knew that the road would be challenging, that the money wouldn't solve everything. But it was a beginning, a chance for a fresh start, not just for her, but for the people she wanted to help. She walked to the table, her fingers grazing the check once more. As she picked it up, the weight of it felt different now. Not heavy, but empowering. She had taken the first step toward a new chapter, a chapter where her actions could change the world around her. And she was ready for it. With one final glance at the mirror, Elena walked out the door. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the city streets outside hummed with life. But Elena was no longer just a part of the world. She was ready to shape it. The weight of the decision had lifted from her shoulders, and in its place was a sense of freedom, of purpose. Her life had irrevocably changed, and as she stepped into the future, she knew this was only the beginning. If you enjoyed this story and found it as captivating as we hoped, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. We would love to hear your thoughts on the story. What did you think of Elena's journey, her decision, and the life-changing twist at the end? How do you feel about Jonathan Crane's unexpected gift and Elena's path forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how you would have handled this situation. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and share where you're tuning in from. Finally, please rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. Your feedback helps us improve and deliver content that resonates with you. Thank you for watching.